As we know from the booklet, our panel for today at this time is on Sufism with regional case studies for peaceful coexistence, with study cases in Indonesia, India, and Bangladesh. As our first speaker, we have Dr. Suraya IT, who specializes in Islamic studies, Western political philosophy, Orientalism philosophy, and other subjects. She is currently a lecturer at the State Islamic University, or UIN Ar-Raniri in Banda Aceh. She is the chair of the Institute for Islamic Studies, Interreligious Dialogue and Peace, a non-profit organization affiliated with State University Raniri Banda Aceh and Institute for Interreligious Studies at Temple University. We can see her more complete bio in the booklet, and without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Suraya to start her presentation.
Thank you very much.
And everybody is going to present about 18 to 22 minutes, depending on whether the other speaker is coming among us. Okay, Dr. Suraya, time is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me opportunity for this conference. My topic today is the role of Sufism in modern world. A case study of Indonesia, particularly is I focus on Aceh. As we know that the process of Islam spread in Indonesia is conducted by trader and Muslim scholar from Middle East and India. Islam grew rapidly during the era of Samudra Pasai and Aceh Kingdom. Islam was introduced by trader and Muslim scholar with mission to spread Islamic teaching. Most of those Muslim missionaries have a Sufi network. One of Islam reformer Sufi figure in Indonesia who came from India is Nuruddin Ar-Raniri. That right now my university is we call State Islamic University of Ar-Raniri. Is the name is came from actually is Sheikh Nuruddin Ar-Raniri. Other Sufi figure who also influenced the Sufi tradition in Indonesia were Abdul Rahman As-Singkili and Hamzah Al-Fansuri. In Indonesia, the majority of students and teachers who study and practice Sufism belong to Tariqah Qadariyah. In order for Sufi to explore the esoteric spiritual dimension of form and to gain eternal insight, they must engage in a highly disciplined practice to cleanse their soul. This provides opportunity for Sufi to occasionally gain specific spiritual experience. Besides that, the development of, as we know that the development of science and technology have brought not only a lot of convenience to mankind, but also deep of cynicism toward the religious and spiritual aspect of life. There emerged value crisis of humanity marked by the crisis of spirituality. At the same time, many societies are facing deep crisis. There is uncertainty about the future and create new crises for maintenance of religious boundaries. Further complexity is the power that play religion in the contemporary world. Religion decline in Western society that force of modernization and secularization. On the contrary, it's very hard to understand the modern world without understand the major religious tradition and influence that cut across global boundaries and fit into a shape global politics. This condition makes the world vulnerable to violence and conflict. Therefore, the global community has to be more vigilant than before to fight the situation with religious value. Sufistic thought as a form of human spirituality reconstruction is relevant to answer this phenomenon that we discussed before, because the characteristic of Sufism or mysticism is common in almost all religions. Understanding Sufism is a foundation for searching for alternative life problem solution. Sufism developed from the private sphere into the popular Islamic culture. Therefore, spirituality is a phenomenon that is potentially inherent in human. Sometimes spirituality refers to the search for sacred things in life. Sufism is the best way to restore a person to spiritual consciousness through the transcendental dimension. Sufism is also used as a medium to create a peaceful understanding of the reality of the world. Therefore, to understand Sufism, one must first to understand the terminology of mysticism. Sufism is sometimes used as medium to create peaceful understanding of the reality of the world. Sufism was also be described as metaphysical psychology, is based on Islamic source and appropriate for addressing the maladies afflicting the present day world. Sufism teaches that it is possible for us to see beyond the veil of darkness, which includes our belief system. Sufism is the voice of peace, coexistence, compassion, and equality, a call to universal brotherhood. Movement, practice, and teaching of Sufism began to be loved by the community today, particularly in Aceh province, Indonesia. This phenomenon especially occur in many urban environments. Sufi approach is relevant both today's society and to question that will shape humanity's direction in the future. Issue relating the community value, cultural diversity, environment preservation, economic equity, and conflict resolution are all considered in the teaching of Islam. Various Sufi masters sought to address this issue. Just engaged in Sufi practice are playing the knowledge of Tasawwuf to feel as a varied as sustainable development, education, therapy, parenting, science, and technology, and cross-cultural communication. Disciples of Sufism views service as the mean, not an end. Artwork alone cannot resolve the problem that base humanity. For this problem root lie in the human heart. As Islam spread to Asia and later to Africa, monistic variation of Sufism in the most sophisticated version, the doctrine of unity of being or Wahdatul Wujud, associated with Ibn Arabi, were most more compatible with the local conception of immanent Godhead and easily emerged with all the local belief and practice. It was, however, not anti-Sufism Puritan who carried out the struggle for reform of this belief. Most of the early reformers were Sharia-oriented Sufi themselves. In Indonesia, in the early 20th century, the Sufi order had found a new appreciation among the educated. This was partly no doubt a response to the Islamic resurgence and the prominence of increasingly militant group in many society. Sufism offered a more ironic discourse, which was more tolerance and non-conformism and more conducive to interfaith harmony, and which was embraced by quite significant section of the modern middle class and intellectually more respectable alternative to Islamism influential modern thinkers such as is influenced by Muhammad Iqbal and Abdul Karim Soros, who both took highly negative view of popular Sufism and the blind obedience to Sufi sheikh that is demanded of their follower in many order, but at the same time strongly and consciously influenced by metaphysical Sufism of such classical Sufi authors as Maulana Rumi and Ibn Arabi. In part because of them, classical Sufism author regained respectability among the Muslim intellectual elite. Therefore, Sufism has an important value for modern life, which is further away from social life in the midst of the lifestyle of modern society that is individualistic and materialistic. Sufism can be one alternative to achievement of balancing human life of the world and the hereafter. For the background that we have been described above, this research would like to see how phenomenon of movement of spirituality in the dimension of Sufism really powerful to improve the misfortune that previously infecting modern world. By studying this Sufi order in global context will bring attention to the world as a grassroots of idea and spirituality which continue to enlighten our life and time. Secondly is Sufism and civilization. Even though Sufism covered a broad spectrum, practitioner and expert from Islamic history have generally accepted the following what we call a doctrine of disciplines whose goal is to remind humanity of their moral value as written in the Quran and Hadith. Sufism deal with morality and ethics. Sufism is the name for the inner of esoteric dimension of Islam, which is supported and complemented by outward or esoteric practice of Islam, such as Sharia. The term Sufism embrace the philosophy and practice, which am a direct communication between God and man, and those who practice Sufism called Sufis. Sufism then developed into the study of the spirit which guide human behavior. It is also a form of Islamic mysticism that emphasizes spiritual closeness with God. From Neoplatonic tradition, the word mystic means wordless contemplation or silent, derived from its Greek interpretation to be silent in thousand languages. The terminology was also used by traditional Christian and originated as the mystikos of essential and esoteric spiritual interpretation, with meaning arose from religious text in opposite to literal and exoterically derived interpretation. The mysticism Sufism is also an inseparable part of religion. Beginning the 12th century, Sufism was a mainstay for Islamic of the social order for Islamic civilization. And since that time, it has spread throughout the Muslim world, including China, West Africa, and United States. Sufism has shaped literature and art for centuries and associated with many of the most resonant pieces of Islam and Golden Age. In modern time, the predominant view of Sufism Islam is one of love, peace, and tolerance. It is important to note also that Sufi Islam thrived in the civilization which had long and rich cultural history. Sufism emphasis is on inner being of human person. Sufism flourished also in Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Central Asia region, India, Southeast Asia, and this region had very rich civilizational history and culture and integrated themselves with local culture, custom, and tradition. Sufi order as traditionally constituted have persisted in Muslim heritage throughout the world. There has also been much innovation in the institutional arrangement through which study and practice of Sufism are carried out today. Modern knowledge is based on the concept of social historical space continually constructed and discounted by activities of social actor. Its group fight to impose its hegemony over the other, not only to political power control of state, but also to cultural system persistent as the universal one. On the contrary, the Quran insists on the necessity of men to listen, to be aware, reflect, penetrate, understand, and meditate as is known, the Quran and Sunnah as the fundamental source of Islamic thought and civilization. Sufism is a celebration of diversity and pluralism that every people have its own path of truth, belief, and focus of reference. Each of the great world religion, however, differ historically in terms of their attitude, background, and position on how to deal with mystical experience within their respective religious tradition. This would reflect the divine message to the Holy Prophet that there is no compulsion in religion, and also that of every people have appointed way at the worship where they observe. This value are need of our time. Its message is beyond the confine of school and sector. It is spiritual guess that trace its origin from Holy Prophet and fundamental value of Islam, which literally mean peace. I don't read all of my paper. I try to skip to get me on time. Sufism and its role in transformation of society. Generally, one strategy for repositioning Sufism in the modern world is to promote, in the word of Hamka. Hamka is the ulama in Indonesia, one of Indonesian most prominent modernist reformer of the 20th century. What they call tasawuf tanpa tarikat. That is Sufi teaching and some Sufi practice tasawuf without resource. The Sufi order or tarikat. That's according to Professor Hamka promote this what we call tasawuf tanpa tarikat. As a member of Indonesia's leading modernist organization, the Muhammadiyah, Hamka wished to encourage a modern Islamic ethos of rationality and personal responsibility that he thought was incompatible with the teaching from a Sheikh. In this popular book, what they call Tasawuf Modern, was published in 1939 in Indonesia, still in print today. He gave the expanding Muslim middle class and intelligentsia who should take on the task of building a new nation, kind of do it yourself, guide to ethical reflection, and the cultivation of Sufi spiritual value and the course of everyday life. The urban community used the Tasawuf teaching to develop new industry based on religion because of needed by the urban community. The saturated urban community against the competition of life that has created a new Sufism market for new understanding of religion and spirituality and enter the area of mass communication and technology. According to Teja, in his book, explained that contemporary Sufism is basically not in the rank of Rahman's Neo-Sufism and the modern Tasawuf that Hamka carried out. According to Hamka, modern Tasawuf is a deep esoteric religious expression, but not necessarily self-exile or uslah. Neo-Sufism emphasized the need for self-involvement in society more than in early Sufism. Neo-Sufism tend to revive Salafi activity and reinvigorate a positive attitude toward life. Carrying toward the spirit of Neo-Sufism, a formist of the 19th century and adapting the 20th century, the Naqshbandi community has discontinued ritual promoting extraordinary religious experience and stress instead disciplining practice like sohbet to undergrad work in the world with proper ethical component. Sufism as a greatest tool for addressing global issue is not its tradition of social action. Attempt to deal with problem of the level of the problem may be succeed. More likely, they will not. We must look beyond external manifestation into the heart of human being. Dedicated practice of Sufism make for an increasingly integrated and transformed human being. This understanding can provide a concrete evidence when we're looking at the phenomenon that occur in the midst of the city today. There are Sufi institutions that have no direct route to the tariqat that are much commercialized as well. Just for example, Indonesia Islamic Media Network, we call IMAN, Paramedia Islamic Studies Group, also Takia Foundation, Tasawuf Islamic Center Indonesia, they call TC, and others group. This group try to study and apply the teaching of Sufism in daily life in Burg. For example, group zikir. Group zikir is taubah, terapi zikir. The face of Sufism in another form is done and in very well behaved emotional spiritual question, what we call SQ, under the leadership of Ari Ginanjar. Unfortunately, the thing mentioned above show more the form of contemporary mysticism itself, a new form that takes place in the midst of urban society. In Aceh today, also the practice of Sufism, what they call zikir seribu is 1,000 zikir that perform every Thursday night before Friday. It is also participated by 1,000 of people every week before the pandemic COVID-19 in Aceh is every Thursday evening they perform the zikir. They call zikir seribu. It participated by 1,000 of the follower. It's amazing, and also the follower is came from the educated people and also intellectual and also the banker and many of them is came from the middle class up society.
Suraya, I think if you can
yes?
conclude your talk, that would be good for further discussion later on in the question and answer.
Okay, because the timing is okay. Actually, I want to elaborate a little bit about the what we call the new Sufism that according to Hamka that practice today in most part of Indonesia like Aceh, but because of the timing is very limited. Okay, I will conclude my presentation. Neo-Sufism is a doctrine that esoteric value of religious practice encourage people to engage in society actively and pay good attention for their social problem. Neo-Sufism affirms a balanced religious life between worldly and heavenly life because they are very important to every Muslim. Therefore, Neo-Sufism, as described by researchers, try to address the concept of tawazun or balance as its basis. Sufi order, as traditionally constituted, have persisted in Muslim heritage society and in the diaspora community throughout the world. There has also been much innovation in the institutional arrangement through which study and practice of Sufism are carried out today. Uh, I would like to conclude my presentation that the sign of nature is human endeavor to understand nature, and the sign of religion is human endeavor to understand religion. Religion just continue to be an important identity for each believer in society. Religious belief and practice have a large impact on the personal life and influence public life on daily basis. All social relations were inevitably and legitimately engaged with religious tradition and practice. The possibility of religion in modern world can be felt through altered functioning of religion. When the spiritual love of Sufism, not the violent force of terrorism, flow across the border, this region will be the paradise of earth. Peace is primarily peace of mind and heart, a state in which there is underlying in one relation with God in the first place and with others in the second place. As holistic and transcendent philosophy, Sufism provides Muslims greater latitude to engage in debate about increasingly divisive politics shaping their society while confronting the stringent and narrowing ideology of fundamentalism. Therefore, Sufism has an important value to modern life, which is further away from social life. In the midst of lifestyle of modern society that is individualistic and materialistic, Sufism can be one alternative to the achievement of a balanced human life of the world and the hereafter. It also Sufism as spiritual doctrine that practice has gained attractive to many Muslims in modern world as an alternative to the political and Puritan of Islam. Also, the Sufism can certainly help to inspire a new generation of Muslim followers eager to express their inner conviction and reconnect with their lost heritage. Sufism also can serve as critical reminder of its deep commitment to help Muslim consciousness against the ever-growing materialism and consumerism plaguing the modern world. Therefore, the Sufism has a significant role is not only understanding modernity but also enjoying the fruit of modernism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suraya. Now we are going to listen to the presentation of Professor Hamidullah Marazi. But before I let him speak, I would like to make sure that the third presenter is not among us today. If you are here with different screen name, please let me know. Otherwise, we are going to listen to the presentation of our next speaker, Professor Hamidullah Marazi. He is a professor of Islam and comparative religion, and he is the head of the Department of Religious Studies at Central University of Kashmir. He is the founding editor of Insight Islamicus, refereed and indexed Journal of Islamic Studies and Research on Islamic Studies from the University of Kashmir. He has written 4 volumes on Muslim thinkers. His book on Knowledge and Purpose is being prepared for publication by IOS, New Delhi. Congratulations, Dr. Marazi. Now time is yours.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Uh, my dear friends, Professor Tom Donin and Shalauddin Kafrawi, Soraya Ben, and Ethan Anwar, and so many other friends I am able to see after a long time. And we were expecting to be in Italy, but we could not be there. We wanted to be in New York, we could not be there. These are the ways of Allah, and these have mystical lessons for us. As Hazrat Ali has said, Araftu Rabbi bi faskil azaib. I have known my God when my proposals were disturbed. So our proposals and proportions are disturbed again and again because He is the ultimate power and He knows His ways better. But Alhamdulillah, we are able to at least meet virtually. And I feel so happy to see good friends of mine whom I used to meet there in Rochester 3 years back. And my topic will be mysticism as a remedy to violence in light of the spiritual legacy of Sufis of Indian subcontinent. But before saying something on the subject, I would like to say that as Graham Fuller has rightly said in his book, World Without Islam, that though there is a lot of conflict between Islam and the West, but the Masnavi of Mullah Rumi is the best seller in USA. So Sufism and spirituality is conquering the hearts and minds of people because we have to be spiritual. Basically, man is a spiritual animal. And that can be the crux of the whole Sufi teachings. And let me tell you, I am reminded about the Sufi Pir Zia, who belongs to the order of Hazrat Anayat Khan from the Chastiya order. He came once to Delhi and he said, when there was no communication between West and the East, the Sufis opened the channel of communication through music, Sama, with the West. And that was the best communication. And when the people of the West came to know about Salah, about Allah, about Prophet, now they started working for these terms and looking for the meaning. And this was the opening of the channel of communication. Now, after the clash of civilizations, which is taking place everywhere, and unfortunately, this world has become double troll and there is conflict everywhere. A lot of bloodshed has been taken place so far everywhere. And even intra-religious conflicts are there and religious conflicts are there. And we are reminded about the situation when the Sufis came to India and then they preached the gospel of truth and peace and love and harmony. And they changed the whole face of Indian subcontinent. And Islam was preached in Indian subcontinent through peaceful means, not by violence, as has been endorsed by scholars like Arnold in his book Preaching of Islam, and other scholars of the West even and the East as well. Basically, I am also reminded about Bediüzzaman Nursi's statement that in the Western part of the world, mostly the philosophies have grown, but in the Eastern part of the world, spirituality and prophets have just they have preached their religions. And because of that reason, we find in West most of the philosophy, in East most of the spirituality and dialogue and samvad. So now East reaches to West and West has to reach to East, and especially there is need of communication between Islam and the West, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists and all. So with these words, I am just starting my presentation. So far as Islam is concerned, we need to understand that basically Islam is a religion or a deen, way of life. And we know what is religion. Religion is the means of social control, but religion and morality also formulate and shape the human behavior. Religion and morality are the most influential forces of social control, as well as most effective guides of the human behavior. The social life of man, in addition of its economic, political, philosophical, scientific, and other aspects, has also religious and spiritual dimensions. Religion is the major concern of man. Man is always having religious quest, which makes him able to become a restless creature, even beyond the satisfaction of his physical needs. Religion provides around man's faith in the supernatural forces. Religion is concrete experience which is associated with emotions, especially with fear, awe, or reverence. So this is religion and this is tasawwuf also, as in my estimation. I don't separate between religion and tasawwuf or mysticism. religion has to graduate to spirituality, otherwise it will cease to be a religion. It will become philosophy, it will become politics, it will become something else, and it will become violence. So in this way, the support of functional theory of religion, they confirm the same view that religion is a universal permanent and perennial institution, and it has a vital function in maintaining the social system as a whole. So this is something about religion. And when we talk about Islam, so Islam talks about peace. And Islam is la ikraha fi din. There is compulsion in the matters of religion. When the truth has become evident, there is no place for any violence.
You speak now. Professor Marazi?
It appears we have lost him.
Yeah, there is another screen with his name. Could you turn on the other one?
Audible?
Ah.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Now I will just try to sum up what I have to say, then we can have a good discussion about the subject. Basically, Islam has come to India through the Sufis. Especially we have Muinuddin Chasti, who has come from Afghanistan, and he settled at Delhi.
Patricia, could you turn on his mic?
It looks like we've lost him again.
Yeah, there is one screen under his name, but I don't have the voice.
Ah, here he comes. Professor Marazi, are you with us?
Okay, we will wait for him. But meanwhile, why don't we prepare questions for Dr. Suraya? And you can put it on chat, or if you would like to talk, you can do so as well.
I was wondering, Professor Suraya, Dr. Suraya wanted to say something about her new Sufism, and she wasn't able to. Does she want to do that?
Pardon me, I cannot hear you. Can you?
Zakia, could you?
Now, you said you were unable, you wanted to tell us about the new Sufism, but because of the time limit, you were not able to. So do you want to use this time for that?
Okay.
Sorry for this disruption because of the internet connectivity. Am I audible now?
Okay.
Okay.
I think you can continue. Suraya, you can hold on to.
Yeah. So basically, I was just talking about the Sufi teachers in India, and we know that basically it was the Muinuddin Chasti and other Sufis belonging to different orders of Tasawwuf who have brought Islam to India with the love, affection, and a lot of fellow feeling. And they were say, for example, it has been said by Nizam Tawliya that a Muslim has to have the magnanimity like a sun, and he should be that much generous as the river. And in the same way, we find that he has talked about also that man has to work like a needle to stitch the cloth and make people one in that way. And he said one should not curse anyone if anyone is very hurt. One should pray to God to guide one's enemy towards the right path. I will just relate some of his such type of teachings. So he says that there is a South Indian folk song which has been sung by the Sufis. They say, into the bosom of the one great sea full of streams that come from hills on every side. Their names are various as their springs, and thus in every land do men bow down to one great God, though known by many names. And then we have Sheikh Nizamuddin Awliya, and then we have Ganj Sakar and other Sufis. For example, Bakhtiyar Kaki would say, a Salik should speak less, sleep less, and abstain from the worldly luxuries so that he is not taken up by the passions of revenge and anger. Hazrat Qutb Bakhtiyar Kaki was asked, what type of prayer was this which is acceptable to Allah? And when he asked this question to Muinuddin Chasti, he replied that that prayer consists in hearing the complaints of the aggrieved and assist them, to help the needy and the oppressed, to feed the people and to get free the captives from captivity. All these things Muinuddin emphasized are of great importance. And he says it is mentioned that giving sadaqah, charity, is better than offering 1,000 rakat of prayers. So this fellow feeling and about saying if a person is busy in awrad and wazaif, that's invocations and prayers, and a needy person comes, it is necessary for him to leave awrad, invocations, and attend to his needs. The greatest austerity is to remember one's death. Then he says, 3 persons will not even to smell the scent of paradise: a darwish who is a liar, the miserly person, and a dishonest businessman. And he says that 3 organs are necessary for the Gnostic prayer: heba, ta'zim, and haya. That is a modesty. To be ashamed of one's sins is heba. To be obedient to ta'zim and to have trust only in God and to not cast eye on anyone else is haya. So we have not to have a covetous eye on anyone else, and especially the women who are gair muharram. He says to speak to people in a way so that their world and akhirah is safeguarded, to be humble, to be in solitude, to love everybody, and to think oneself the meanest of all, to be always self-submitting, to be patient in every affliction, to be submissive and passionate at heart, to be content and mutawakkil. So these are the teachings of Hazrat Khaja Nizam Muinuddin Chasti. And he has said that once a man came to kill Khaja, and at that time, but he could not kill him, and there were many other people around. And then this man felt very much ashamed why he had come to kill him. Khaja told him further that since he had not done anything wrong to him, and he started even praying for him. The man became very much impressed and became his disciple. It is said that this man performed 45 pilgrimages and even was buried at Makkah when he died there during a Hajj. So this was the behavior. Even they were just forgiving their killers and who had come to kill them. And it is said that whenever a neighbor would die, Khaja would go for the funeral prayers. And even after all funeral rites, he used to be, when people had completed the funeral prayers, he would stay back in solitude on the grave and would remain busy in supplicating for the dead person. What to say of the living persons, but even for the dead person, they had sympathy and they have the, karuna. So in this way, he has said that inhabitants of the land made almost every object and being a partaker of divinity. Stocks and stones, trees and beasts, they were being worshipped when Muinuddin Chasti came to India. And then the life of Khaja was very simple. but his spiritual acumen was that great that his one glance on a person would transform a sinner into a saint. I am reminded about Junaid Baghdadi. Once a Christian lad asked him, what is the meaning of the saying, "Ittaqu bi farasatil mu'min fa innahu yanzuru bi nurillah"? He said, you need to become a Muslim. Although he was not a Muslim at the time, so such was their insight, as has been said in a hadith of the Prophet, when a friend of Allah is seen, people remember God. Though we have not access to all details of his life, therefore we cannot imagine about the real influence of the Khaja on the life and search of Ajmer. However, there is a statement in Sirul Awliya that even a very prominent courtier of Prithvi Raj was among the murids of the Khaja, although he was a non-Muslim and he was a Hindu, but he was one of the disciples of Muinuddin Chasti. In Sirul Awliya, we have also this much, that by his stepping in which graceful steps in India, the son of certainty, who was in form of Muinuddin, that the darkness of this land was changed with the light of Islam because of his spiritual acumen. And thousands and thousands of people used to embrace Islam by his preaching and by his etiquette and way of preaching Islam. He believed in reconciliation and called it a national leader for unity. He often said, remember, freedom and humanity is separate, but where there is no freedom, there is no humility. Without humanity, freedom is worthless. These are attributed to other Sufis also. It was especially Abu Abdul Haq, who was from Bangladesh, based nowadays Bangladesh, but earlier Punjab. And in this way, Abu Bakr Siddiqui, who founded many charitable institutions, orphanages, and free Hala centers, he was also a great educationist who realized it only through education that he can free the society of the evils, and so he founded several madrasas. So they were just trying to establish madrasas, khanqahs, and langars for the poor people, and there was no discrimination of Hindu and Muslim. And Sufis helped reinforce ties between the Hindus and Muslims in the Indian subcontinent, and Muslims regarded Hindus to be their neighbors, and the others were just also not looking nicely towards their downtrodden people. But the Sufis, they treated each and every person equally, and that was the impact of their good behavior, that most of the people, they started working with them, and then they accepted their precepts. So same is the case in Kashmir, that Sayyid Ali Hamdani came to Kashmir with 700 Sufis and artisans and craftsmen, and then they established the Iranian and Central Asian arts and crafts in Kashmir. And as Iqbal has said rightly, that this man has created a new manner Iran in Kashmir by the beautiful and very nice and good arts and crafts. So in this way, the Sufis were not just teaching and preaching asceticism or renunciation or reclusion, but they were helping people in their day-to-day life, and they were making them spiritually as well as economically viable and vibrant, and they were serving people, because in Tasawwuf, after the worship of Allah, the service of humans is the second trait of every Sufi, and this has been mentioned by almost all the Sufis and the rishis of Kashmir and other parts of the world. We know that in modern times, Sufism has got more relevance because there's a lot of bloodshed everywhere, and even the intra-community conflicts are also taking very heavy toll of humanity. I think these teachings, which have been just brought to fore by the Sufis, if these are highlighted and these are brought to light, and people are made acquainted with these teachings, then our world can change, and new world order of peace and love and harmony will ensue, and then we'll find that this world is worth living. Otherwise, what we find nowadays, that we are finding that there is a lot of hatred which is growing with every passing day, and the theories like clash of civilization are being propounded, and Indian subcontinent can provide the best model of the peaceful living, which was coming along with the Sufi culture in India and Indian subcontinent. And wherever the Sufis have gone, they have preached the gospel of truth, love, and peace, and they lived with their non-Muslim neighbors peacefully, and it was because of their precepts and because of their practice and asceticism and spirituality that people embraced their way of life, and then they just accepted whatever they said. For example, our great Sufi of Kashmir, Sheikh Nuruddin Wali says, "O fool, right action does not lie in fasting and other ceremonial rites. O fool, right action does not lie in providing for bodily comforts and ease. In contemplation of the self alone is the right action and right counsel for you." So they were just always talking about the self-restraint, control of one's anger and one's wrath, that growth no Musalman is busy. As Sheikh al-Alam, a great saint of Kashmir, he would say that a Muslim does not need to have an anger, and he should never show any animosity towards anyone else, because all are the creations of God. And then he says, Shiva abides in all, that is everywhere. Then do not discriminate between a Hindu and a Muslim. If you are wise, seek the absolute within yourself. That is true knowledge of the Lord. So this is attributed to Laldit. She was a Shavit, Hindu mystic, but she had very great relations with the Sufis of, Islam, and there had been very great conversations among them. Some of the festivals in Kashmir, which had originated in the Hindu mythology, attained a secular character, and both Pandits and Muslims celebrated them. For example, birthday of river Vatasta and such other type of, ceremonies we have still. That is because of the, culture which was created by the Sufis. And as I said earlier in my beginning, that in the beginning of my speech, I feel that Islam is also basically a spiritual way of life. And I consider the caliphate of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, Umar, Usman Ghani, and Ali, that was a spiritual democracy, as has been mentioned by Dr. Iqbal. They were very spiritually oriented people. They were not worldly people. And all the Sufis have emulated that aspect of Prophet's life and the life of the pious caliphs. And with the passage of time, when a lot of riches came and people became rich, now luxury started taking place, bloodshed took place, and that was because of going astray from Islam and from the way which was just marked by Prophet and his Sahaba and his, the followers of the Sahaba. And then we find Hassan Basri, Rabia Basri, and Junaid Baghdadi, Baz Bistami, Zunun Misri, and so many, Sufis, they came, then Sufi orders emerged, and they preached Islam through peaceful means and with service of the people. And they had two objectives. One was Sidki Maqal and Rizki Halal, to speak truth and eat from the rightful means and do service of the people. So, and the Khanqah used to be the center for all people to come and dine together. And the concept of langar was given by the Sufis. And you may be knowing that the golden temple of Amritsar, the foundation of that was laid down by a Qadri Sufi, whose name was Mi Amir. And such were the relations among Sikhs and Muslims. And in this way, his picture you will still find there hanging on the kitchen wall. And then, the Bhakti movement of India, there were some such Sufis who had very much, great, contribution towards flourishing of this culture of tolerance. And there was, Malik Muhammad Jaisi was there, Kabir was there, and there were others also. And in the Granth Sahib, the holy book of the Sikhs, there is the Bani or the speech of Baba Farid, who was one of the great Sufis and who was the teacher of Hazrat Nizamuddin Awliya. And in this way, you can find that how they created the atmosphere of harmony, where even greatest temple of the Sikhs was, the Muslim Peer and a Sufi was invited to lay down its foundation. Such were the relations among Muslims and non-Muslims, and through this love and affection and, I should say, peaceful way of living, people had, impressed people, influenced people. Because basically, I will end with this. Basically, what is tasawwuf? Tasawwuf is to try to, cultivate such type of, qualities in oneself, where man becomes very much close to the angelic world, and where is more interested in the worship of Allah, in the commemoration of the name of Allah, and being in the spiritual presence all the time. And what is worldliness? To be emulating this, the human, the animalistic or beastly, desires, and to be attached to earth rather than heavens. So Sufism elevates our soul from nafsi ammara to nafsi lawama, and finally it takes us to nafsi mutmaina. And when we get that tranquil soul, then we also have peace with ourselves and with the whole world, and thus we become peacemakers, as the Sufis were the peacemakers, and they were not the part of problem, they were part of solution. And these were the Sufis of Suhrawardi order, who had just tried to reconcile between the Muslim kings and the Mongolites when there was a lot of conflict between these two groups. So even they were just emissaries, and they were ambassadors of peace and love. They were among the warring factions belonging to Muslims and non-Muslims. So such type of role in Indian context we find the Sufis had, and then they have preached Islam through these peaceful means, and they have shunned all type of violence. They were not even taking revenge for their own, the people who had done harm to them, who had abused them, who had come to kill them. Even they forgave them and rather prayed for them. And I am ending with this episode. Once Maruf Tarki with his disciples, they were going to somewhere in a caravan, and there was another caravan, and they were making merry, and they were just drinking, and they were doing all type of strange things. And now I am just ending. And now the disciples of Maruf Karki came to Maruf Karki, and they asked him that please pray for them so that God may have curse on them. He said, raise your hands, and he started supplicating, oh Allah, you have given a lot of luxuries to these people in this world. Give them better luxuries in the life of. When these people listened to these words, then they fell on his feet, and then they repented. This was the way of peace, peaceful way of preaching and living of the Sufis, which has impressed people, and which was abhorring all types of violence to oneself and others, and even to the non-Muslims, and also to the animals and the other creations. And as has been said by Shaykh al-Alam, unposh telili one posh, we can have only forests, we can have only providence and provisions when there is forest. So we should not even harm our forest or our environment. These were the teachings of Indian and Kashmiri Sufis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Morazi. Everyone, it is your turn to ask questions, give your comment to the presentation by Dr. Suraya and Professor Morazi. There is one comment from Doris for Soraya. One of my PhD candidates conducts research from Indonesia. She researched the Arabization of Islam in Indonesia. She argues that it happens through translation of Islamic documents that move away from a more inculturated translation. She fears that this development might cause Islam to radicalize. Do you recognize this development? How can the Indonesian from Sufism you describe respond to such a development? Kak Suraya? It is basically about the Arabization of Indonesia. How does Sufism respond to this kind of trend?
Maybe I would like to respond the question from that.
You're right. From Zakia first about the continuation.
Yes, from Zakia first.
Right.
About
Right.
the new Sufism. Thank you very much for the question. I think the new Sufism put forward a Sufi practice that lead the social piety as well as individual. Sufi movement are only show with the activity of zikir group or follow the suluk, but less touch on aspect of behavior and involvement of someone in social life. Therefore, the new Sufism emphasized the need for greater self-inclusion in society rather than the old Sufism. For example, below is a quote from a version of Zuhud or asceticism, one of the most important elements in Sufism derived from a book in Malay Jawi. That means Sufism is also about raising the consciousness of humanity. It's about healing the fear and hatred that sometimes arise in the human ego. The remedy is love and consciousness, and they have to work together. Sufism help people to step out of compulsion, of hatred, mistrust, and resentment. In other words, Sufism is about human transformation. That the concept of new Sufism, like I discussed before about the promoted by Professor Hamka, what they call Sufi tanpa tarikat. Sufi tanpa tarikat. That mean is tasawuf tanpa tarikat is Sufi teaching, and some Sufi practice tasawuf without resource the Sufi order or tarikat. That's what I mean. Thank you very much. That's my response to the question from Zakia.
And to the second question, that is with regard to the Arabization of Indonesian Islam.
Indonesian Islam to counter about the militarism, you mean?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
There is a question about, there is a concern about the Arabization of Indonesian Islam that comes with it, sense of radicalism among Indonesians. So how do you answer this kind of concern from a Sufi point of view?
Like we discussed about before, is the concept of Sufism is how to approach people with the peace and without hatred of others party or others group. I think the issue of radicalism in Indonesia, if actually is quite complicated today at today political situation, because the problem is as we know that Islam in Indonesia at the moment is quite under pressure, I think, from the government side. That is, I think, is not good because of the when the Muslim pressure, it will defensive from the some Muslim group. It will encourage the Muslim to be radicalism. Therefore, is Sufism is one of the solution to answer this problem. It means is how to heal with the Sufist approach that to heal people, to not hatred, to solve the problem on the issue of hatred and radicalism, because of the political situation at the moment in Indonesia. Like I said before, is not good, because for the Muslim perspective, it seems that Muslim is under pressure by government right now. We realize or not, we agree or not, but in the reality, it's from the Muslim perspective, they see the issue is quite complicated. Therefore, for my perspective, in this radicalization in Indonesia, the government have to be wise, have to be approached with the what we call Sufi practice. For example, like in Aceh, it's right now, every week before the COVID-19, they have gathered together thousands of people, gathered together to do zikir, to get along with the community and to know each other. So to do what they call silaturahmi, and then reduce the radicalism and militarism, but more what we call this promote peace and solve in inner soul with the new Sufist approach that is very important in modern society, I think, rather than we pressure the Muslim for the one corner that is not wise, not good in the future of Muslim Indonesia. To reduce radicalization is, I think, we have to do dialogues and approach with in Sufi's perspective is how to work together, to do zikr together, to solve the problem together. It's much better because it's honestly, I would like to say is right now is quite complicated. The issue right now in Indonesia in the political perspective about what is that not good for the future is we continue this hatred happen in the community about divided community. Therefore, is how to bring a divided community to get together right now is very important, because is divided community is not good for the future of Muslim Indonesia, I think. Therefore, I encourage our friend, encourage the Muslim scholar to have worked hard to united together to bring peace and reduce hatred among the people, even is the political situation is not for my perspective. Maybe we are different perspective on it. So is from my perspective is quite complicated right now. I agree with Doris that is. It seems for the perspective for the Western side, it maybe is why is radicalism right now increase in the issue of militarism and radicalism, and also the fundamentalism is quite a bit increased in Indonesia. I agree about that, but is I think is for us is not a big problem if we solve the problem with approach of dialogue and approach with new Sufism practice. It will be very effective, I think, in my perspective, because my experience in my province that we did together with the what we call Sufi tanpa tarikat, like promoted by, actually is promoted by Hamka before, but no, it's happened everywhere in Indonesia, particularly in Aceh. Is we get together, we practice Sufism, and we get along with God in our perspective, and healing about fear and hatred that sometimes arise in human ego. This common everywhere, I think. This is my comment about radicalism in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Is there any question for Dr. Marazi?
Yeah, there's one question from Apros Bisati, Dr. Apros Bisati sir. Can you read that for me, sir? I'm not able to see it from here. It is on the chat box.
Oh yeah, sorry.
What is that? I am not able to see that. Can you read this?
This is for Professor Hamidullah. In the present age of extreme materialism, the Sufism becomes more relevant for its emphasis on Zabtin Nafs. But why then most of the scholars and Muslims movement ignore its value, thus distancing themselves from Sufism? Dr. Afroz Ahmad Bisati.
It's a very good question. I think that Afroz Saab himself is a great scholar of Sufism, and he has been teaching this subject for so many years now. And he has worked on Sheikh Ahmad Sarandi for his research PhD. So he knows it very well, and we know also that basically there has been a lot of propaganda against Sufism, and there have been some practices which are attributed to Sufis, which were not basically the Sufi practices. So wrongly those have been attributed. And there are people who have become materialistic in their approach to everything in this world. So they have started abhorring Sufis. And a lot of propaganda against Sufism was made by many vested interests. And then one group of them just wanted to say that Sufism is the actual face of Islam. Other groups say, no, they are away from Islam, their practices are not Islamic. So the Muslim scholars could not decide about that. So they could not become popular in modern time Muslims as they used to be once. And their role was very important. So now what is the need if we want to get them, their role once again in our society? That let us present the actual face of Sufism, not that which has been tarnished or which has been polluted by un-Islamic and without the non-spiritual sources. Although we know that the actual Sufis of Islam, Junaid Baghdadi, Sheikh al-Qadir Jilani, Imam Ghazali, Imam Rabbani, Ibn Arabi, they all were the adherents of Sharia. Then to say that Sufis were against the Sharia, that is a great concoction statement, because one of the great Sufis of Indian subcontinent and also Afghanistan, Maudud Chist, says that if a person is inviting us towards something else than Quran and Sunnah, he is not a Sufi, he is a Satan. And even about Mansur, Sheikh al-Qadir Jilani said that had he been in my times, I would have made him to repent and he would have not been killed. So my point is that to call everything Islamic, whatever on the name of Sufism, that has tarnished the image. Now the actual image of the Sufism needs to be established, and so that people are able to again adopt the way of Sufis, and the spirituality is also getting the momentum in our society. And the propaganda which has been made against the real Sufism, that is also removed. Then I feel in modern times also, as in West, we find that Naqshbandiya silsila of Hazrat Nizam, that has become very popular, and they have more than 6 million followers in all countries of the world. And that is known as Haqqani, Sufi sect. And in this way, I have also come to know as Professor Sarah Cohen. She had come last year to our university, and she also mentioned that in Europe, Sufism is becoming very much popular in this materialistic environment. So in our part of the world also, it can get momentum once we present it in the actual form as it was presented by the earlier Sufis through their actions and their preaching and their precept, and by their peaceful way of preaching. So that is the duty of Islamic scholars like Afroz Saab, like Kafravi Saab, and like all others, to present the actual face of Tasawwuf before the world and before the Muslims as well, so that the tarnished image of the Sufis is removed, and the actual image of the Sufis is reinforced with the arguments and with the precepts and with the forceful, I should say, articulation. So that is my take on his question, and it's a very relevant question. Thank you.
Thank you. Zakia?
Professor Hamidullah, this is something that is always bothering me, because that's why I don't use the term Sufism. Whatever you said, and historically also it's true, because the Sufis, I actually use the word Muslim mysticism or ma'rifah. I'm really, really trying to take this away, because it has been too much of a baggage attached to it now. And historically too, these people were always against the ruling class, because they being oppressive or very materialistic. So they had to go underground, the Muslim mystics. I keep on saying Muslim mystics instead of Sufis. And so there was this layer to it. And then when they came to the West, and some of the people who brought it to the West, whether the followers did it or they did it, I don't know, but they started tailor cutting it to suit the taste of the West, and trying to take away the 5 times prayer and so on and so forth, and saying all you have to do is zikr, which suits the Western people of just chanting. Because I know of a group here, and the teacher, he passed away in 1986. He even made a mosque to make sure that they say their prayers. But a significant 30% of them saying, oh, no. He said, just if you do zikr, you don't have to do the prayers. They do fast. So you see, everybody's tailor cutting it. And in the name of Sufism, almost as if it's a separate branch of faith, which is beautiful and everything. If Sufism, Islamic mysticism, right, if I see it as the inner dimension of Islam, when we progress, and if we want to progress, it has to have an intention, and yet we eventually, hopefully, will realize into that state. And to make it a separate or very beautiful part of not really Islam, if I'm a Sufi, this thing disturbs me very much, as I've been living in the West for 4 decades. Now, what the good part is what you told me, that in the Muslim countries, there is a train of correct Muslim mysticism, not the kind that I'm seeing at the West. So that is for me a sign of hope, that those young people will realize into the beauty of this, the mystical aspect of a tradition. And the mystical aspects of every tradition is very beautiful, not just Islam.
So here I would just mention one point, Madam Zakia, and I'm very happy that you have just made a very valid point. And this has been a worry of myself also when I was not a student of mysticism and Sufism, whatever you may call it. And I have been teaching now for the last 30 years, almost Tasawwuf. And I have written also several books on the subject, made many students to do PhD on this. And I can categorize Tasawwuf in different compartments. As has been said by many scholars of Islam, Ghazali, Shah Allah Dahlevi, and Ashraf Ali Thanvi, and even Hajwari, Ali Hijwari, and even one of the Sufis says, once upon a time, Sufism was a reality without name. Now it's a name without reality. So he can call anything Sufism.
We all know that.
But the problem, you are right. But to just think that we have to just to make some dances and whirling dervishes, and we do need to go for prayers. So what type of tasawwuf is that? So that has not been approved by any Sufi who is the important Sufi. And there are some Sufi, they claim themselves to be Beshara Sufi. So what type of Sufi will be without Sharia? As has been said by Ashraf Ali Thanvi, Sharia is just like the milk. And tasawwuf is just like the curd or the ghee, whatever you may call it. So if there is no milk, there can be no curd, there can't be no butter. So everything is based on Sharia. And same thing has been said by Junaid Baghdadi, that Sufi is a person, in his one hand there is Sharia, in second has spirituality. So if there is no Sharia, then there is no tasawwuf at all. That is the deceit of the Satan, I should say, as has been said by Baiz Bistami. I'm talking about Sufis themselves. Baiz Bistami had a disciple. He was claiming that I am going every day to the angelic world. Then Junaid Baghdadi had his student. And then Junaid Baghdadi was told that your disciple claims to be going to the angelic world every day. He told people to tell him when he reaches to the angelic world, he should say, La hawla wa la quwwata. Then he did accordingly, and he found himself in the stable of the animals. So my point is that sometimes people are just allured by Satan, by devil, and then they start hypnotizing and doing these things and having this narcotics and then this opium and other things, and then they start saying such things which are totally unfounded. So this is not tasawwuf. This is the great, I should say, it is a slur on the name of tasawwuf, and it has nothing to do with tasawwuf. As I have found tasawwuf from the books of the Sufis, like Ahal al-Muddin, like Quwwatul Qulub, like Kashf al-Mahjub, and Maktubati Imam Rabbani Rahmatullah, and other Sufis. So there you find the Sharia, and Sharia is so much evident there. There is no possibility of anything else than following of Sharia, because they are working for realizing the inner aspect of worship. To taste, as Ghazali would say, that we want to experience, not on express, what is the spiritual life. And he says it is zawq, it is not expression. It is something to feel. Then he quotes Ibn Mu'taz's couplet, Kana ma kana mimma last azkuru, Khazanil khair wala tasalanil khabar. It was what it was, I don't know what it was. Have good opinion, but don't ask about details. So such an exuberance, such a type of ambience in the presence of God, you feel, as there's a hadith of the Prophet, Antabudullah kana qatara. When Prophet was asked by Hazrat Jibreel, what is ihsan? Prophet said, to worship Allah as you see Allah. If you are not able to see God, He sees you. To feel in presence is tasawwuf. And how you can avoid prayers. It is said about Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, when the Satan came to allure him in the morning time when he was going for tahajjud, and there was some light around. And then voice came from there, oh Abdul Qadir Jilani, why you are troubling yourself? Allah has forgiven your all sins. He said, oh Satan, when Prophet was not forgiven his prayers, how I can be? So next day Satan came and he said, your knowledge has saved you, otherwise I would have deceived you. He said, no, knowledge has not saved me. My Allah has saved me. So these are the allurements of Satan to tell people that you don't need to go for prayer, you go for music, you go for dancing, and then you will get God and tasawwuf. This is not tasawwuf. This is a great propaganda and scandal on the name of tasawwuf. It has nothing to do with the actual tasawwuf which is found in the books or the lives of the great Sufis of Islam, whether Indian, whether Iranian, whether Central Asian, whether European Sufis, because there have been also some Ibn Arabi and others, so great Sufis of Islam. So they have preached Islam in letter and spirit, such a pure Islam in that way that their books are full of the details. They are explaining Quranic verses, ahadith, and the precepts of the great Sahaba and Tabi'in and Taba Tabi. And they don't want to go away from the, and let me just quote about once Baiz Bistami went to the masjid. He came to know that a sheikh has come there. And he found the sheikh spitting out of the window. He said he can't be a sheikh who is not following the sunnah of the Prophet, because Prophet has prohibited from spitting from the windows of masjid. And then he did not meet that person. And once he wanted to eat watermelon, then he did not eat it because he thought that I have not found any hadith how Prophet was cutting this watermelon. Such was the adherence to the sunnah of the Prophet. How they can leave prayers? That is not possible at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question is from Professor Orisoltes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a comment to the last one, which is that the popularization and therefore watering down of mystical traditions within the West, and particularly in the United States, is of course not limited to Muslim mysticism. Jewish mysticism, of course, has on two different levels been the recipient of that kind of a misunderstanding of basic vocabulary. First of all, everybody refers to it as Kabbalah, except they typically mispronounce the word, which indicates how little they know the language in which the word is developed. They say Kabbalah, which is wrong. But Kabbalah is a period and a phase within the history of Jewish mysticism. It follows Merkava, it precedes Chassidut. They are part of a continuum, but Kabbalah is not a synonym for all of Jewish mysticism. More significant, and of course, it's the most egregious example of that about which you guys were just speaking, is a place like the Kabbalah Center that presents what it pretends to be genuine Kabbalah to anyone like Madonna who is interested in gaining some sense of enlightenment, I suppose, with all kinds of, how shall I put it, tricks and issues and ideas that are really not true to Kabbalah in its essence, or more broadly speaking, Jewish mysticism in its essence. So we have that issue more broadly than just with respect to the question of Sufism versus Muslim mysticism as a pair of terms. So I thought I'd just share that.
Yeah, just I wanted to add something a little bit, but it's interesting. What your comment was, I liked it. And I just wonder, Once upon a time, it was Musa bin Maimun who wrote a book. He was a Jewish scholar of medieval times. You know him, a great scholastic philosopher, mashallah, great scholar. And Mishnah, he has, Mishnah he has produced. And he has given the 13, principles of Judaism, better than
Yes.
Isa. And he has written a book, Dalil al-Hayri, in Arabic. And Saadia Khan, that much he quotes Ghazali again and again. He quotes Muslim philosophers and Sufis so many times. But I don't know what happened. I was asking this question yesterday also to some other scholars yesterday. And my Jewish sister, I was asking her that, see, we are the people of the book. You are the people of the book. And we are the sons and daughters of Abraham. And what happened in between that? We have become so much hostile to each other. Otherwise, we used to share even the Sufi traditions. And I see that, even the very name of the book of, Musa bin Maimun, Dalil al-Hayri in Arabic. And Saadia
he wrote, by the way, all of his writing was initially in Arabic. And then subsequently he translated it himself, his major works into Hebrew. But he wrote in Arabic initially.
There has been crisscrossing and overlapping, and a lot of impact of Islam and Judaism on each other's tradition was there. And now that has become a little bit, even yesterday, the madam was talking, she was just speaking about Sakina. She was talking about Malakut. I said, these are the words which have been attributed in Quran to Hazrat Ibrahim, that he had been shown the Malakut and Sakina. And Sakina is used in hadith of the Prophet. So my point basically was this spirituality was the core value of each and every Abrahamic tradition. And Muslim Sufis, they attribute their asceticism to Abraham also, and Jesus also, and other Sufis also, the great prophets.
Thank you.
So this is
Thank you. There is another question from Professor Donlin Smith.
This is simply to make the point that if we had Hindu and Buddhist scholars in our group here, they would probably want to make a similar point as Ori has made about what has happened to yoga and Buddhist meditation as it comes to voracious American consumerist culture and kind of colonized.
Point very well taken. And then you have the phenomenon of Jubus, right? Who are the classic example of that kind of, it's not syncretism as much as watering down in order to be syncretistic.
Basically, even this point which has been raised by our professor, great point. I had no time. I would have discussed that how Buddhism and Jainism and Kashmiri Shaivism has paved way for Islam, spiritual Islam in Kashmir. And there are so many things which are very common at many places. For example, Wahdatul Wujud and pantheism or Vedanta. There are many things which are similar, or yoga. In yoga also meditation. There's Sufi Muraqaba, there's Sufi Mushahada, there's Sufi Mujahada. But although there are also differences, but there is something is common also, because what is my point? It is not based on philosophy as we find in philosophy. There is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In our culture, in our Asian tradition, it has been always dialogue, somewhat. There had been dialogue among the Sufis and scholars of different religions, and then they have exchanged the ideas, and then they have accepted each other's creed. They did not fight, they did not kill. So Islam has been not preached in India or in the Indian subcontinent by force. Only the Sufis and the preachers and missionaries of Islam, they have just had dialogue with the non-Muslims and Hindus and others. And then they just identified the common core of all the religions. Come to the common points between you and us, not the differences. But in the Western context in philosophy, we are going for differences, not for the similarities. Here we were going for the similarities, and that has paved way for this interaction and Sufi culture of dialogue, rather than the conflict and clash of civilization type of, or the survival of the fittest, which is very common in philosophy and such type of theories which we have worldwide. So this is very important point which we need to understand. And then we can't exclude Buddhists or Jains or Hindus, because they had also these such similar traditions of mysticism, spirituality. And I said that even Sikhs and Muslims, they had such great relations that even their foundation of the Golden Temple was laid down by a Sufi saint. And the sayings and the precepts of a Sufi, Farid Baba Farid, are found in Granth Sahib. And Sikhs are reciting that every day in their Gurdwaras. So this type of culture was created by the Sufis of Indian subcontinent. and in Asia. That's my point, basically. Otherwise, we don't exclude Hindus or Buddhists or Jains, because they had also great ascetic traditions and which have played very important. And I say sometimes it was Buddhism which has paved way for Islam in Kashmir. Because before Islam,
Thank you so much, Dr. Marazi. It is getting warmer, even though we have two speakers. We have 2 minutes more than allocated. We can continue the conversation if you would like to, but I don't want to stop anybody from going out in case you need to do something else. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this warm panel. Please fill out the evaluation form that is located on our site, and I think the link is also posted by Patricia on the chat. Thank you again for everyone, Professor Marazi and Professor Soraya IT.